Illuminati MK Ultra Monarch Mind Control Programming, Part 1. Here's a little history on the mind control methods at work in the 1960s.
Electronic mind control research is not new. A scientific milestone in this area came in the 1960s when Dr. Jose Delgado demonstrated remote control over a charging bull. By connecting a radio antenna to electrodes inserted into the bull's brain, Delgado proved that the animal's aggressive impulses could be thwarted by electronically manipulating the bull's muscle reflexes.
Do you realize the fantastic possibilities if from the outside we could modify the inside? Could we give messages to the inside? But the beauty is that now we are not using electrodes.
In recent years, Delgado has shown that the behavior of monkeys can be altered using low-power, pulsating magnetic fields. But in these experiments, there were no antenna implants.
Any function in the brain, emotions, intellect, personality, well, could be perhaps modified by this non-invasive technology.
Delgado's research has so far been limited to animals. But in the Soviet Union, a radio frequency, or RF device, has been used for over 30 years to manipulate the moods of mental patients.
Now, 61 years later, in 2021, mind control is much more powerful and is being done to humans on a massive level. Before the video begins, first understand the terminology of the mind control programs. 1. MK Ultra, the CIA's covert program to create mind-controlled assassins who murder without memory of the events. 2. Monarch Programming, a continuation of the MK Ultra program. 3. Manchurian Candidate, a person who is a programmed assassin, also called a monarch mind-controlled slave. 4. Alter, a disassociated part of the mind, a split personality created from massive torture that is hypnotized and given cue codes, words, symbols, hand signs, etc., to be triggered into action, their programmed mission. Americans should ask themselves why there are so many mass shootings lately.
In addition to all the upheavals caused by the pandemic, social unrest, and heightened political turbulence, Amna Nawaz reports this summer is also shaping up to be a bloody one in our cities and neighborhoods.
From New York to California, Atlanta to Chicago, a July 4th weekend interrupted by gun violence, leaving dozens, including children, dead.
Enough is enough.
In Atlanta, 31 people shot and 5 killed, including 8-year-old Sequoia Turner. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Bottoms.
We are shooting each other up on our streets in this city, and you shot and killed a baby. And it wasn't one shooter, there were at least 2 shooters. An 8-year-old baby.
It should be noted that all the mass shootings in America are being carried out by the CIA's mind-controlled assassins in order to demonize American gun owners and eventually take away our weapons, an old Illuminati agenda. 5. Programmer, a person whom tortures, drugs, hypnotizes, electroshocks, uses repetitious recordings, etc. on a human to create a split personality that is programmed to carry out covert missions without memory of the event. 6. Handler, a person to whom a mind-controlled slave is given to do so whatever they wish, have sex with, order to kill, transport illegal drugs, school shootings, massive killings, child kidnappings, etc. Handlers are always Illuminati secret society members whom stay in line with their orders. 7. Presidential models, sex slaves for the politicians and for the President of the United States and world leaders, also called kittens. Marilyn Monroe was JFK's presidential model, and Trump has his presidential models, as does President Biden. 8. Beta. This is the second Greek letter, and it represents the sexual models and sexual alters that the programmers create inside a monarch slave's mind. Many celebrities are beta slaves and are used as sex toys by their handlers, and they are passed on to politicians and wealthy elites for sexual services, etc. 9. New World Order. The coming one world government that is to be ruled by one man, the Antichrist. Most American politicians are working for this globalization, and the Illuminati's framework for world government is located in New York. It's called the United Nations, a step toward world government. The goal is to globalize the world in a new world order. The war on terror is an excuse to impose globalism on disobedient nations and to justify the creation of a police state in America. Is there any evidence of this New World Order? In the late 1700s, the head of the House of Rothschild put in motion the agenda of a New World Order.
In 1773, Mayor Rothschild invited 12 wealthy, revolutionary-minded men to his goldsmith shop. Together, they formulated a plan to seize control of the world's wealth. They made a pact to secretly pool their money and influence to bankrupt the nations of the world and create a new world order.
Now here are a few among many American politicians calling for a new world order.
And after 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
And we've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
Breaking tonight, 2 weeks into a Donald Trump presidency, and we are already seeing signs of a new world order.
You, your class, has an incredible window of opportunity to lead in shaping a new world order for the 21st century.
10. The Illuminati, the aristocratic families that trace their genealogies deep into the ancient world. The Illuminati are the international bankers. They control America's monetary system through the Federal Reserve, which they created in 1913 using the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, signed into law by Illuminati puppet President Woodrow Wilson. The Illuminati shortly thereafter imposed the income tax on the already beaten American people, as the Illuminati's IRS would be used to intimidate disobedient Americans. The aristocratic families that make up the Illuminati are 1. The House of Rothschild, 2. The Schiffs, 3. Oppenheimers, 4. House of Hanover, 5. Habsburgs, 6. Warburgs, 7. Merovingian dynasty, which the British royal family branched off from, 8. DuPonts, 9. Collins, 10. Astors, 11. Bundys, 12. Rockefellers, 13. Aldobrandini, 14. Morgans, 15. House of Hesse-Kassel, 16. Russells, etc. Note, these families have changed their names throughout history, and they have offspring that carry different surnames to hide the bloodlines they are from. The symbol of the satanic mystery religions of Babylon and Egypt was the all-seeing eye. The Bavarian Illuminati of 1776 in Europe used this same symbol because the Illuminati is the continuation of the mystery religions of the ancient world. Thus, these Illuminati international banking families put the all-seeing eye symbol on the back of the $1 bill in 1935. They also put the Latin-coded messages and the plan. See Illuminati Exposing the Illuminati, Part 1 of 10, on the Show More link below. The official Bavarian Illuminati symbol of 1776 that the Illuminati used to identify themselves with. And now we have the same symbol on the back of the $1 bill because the Illuminati are the international bankers. The Illuminati aristocrats create respectable fronts to operate through and carry out their agendas. The intelligence agencies are the Illuminati's very creation, and the CIA is one of their favorites. Let us now study the history of CIA mind control.
In 1946, the world learns that the US and Russia are not the only superpowers testing mind control techniques. Former Nazi doctors on trial in Nuremberg, Germany, reveal that concentration camps were fertile ground for unwitting mind control subjects.
The Nazis were also looking for mind weapons too, and they had a unit set up at Dachau at the concentration camp at which prisoners were the test subject. There was no shortage of subjects, and there was not the slightest bit of compunction of doing anything evil or bad to them. I mean, they were testing drugs, they were testing mescaline, things like that. One of the experiments that was done was to hypnotize somebody and then ask him to kill somebody. In other words, to see if they would pull the trigger.
As a result of the atrocities at Dachau and other camps, an international code of medical ethics is adopted called the Nuremberg Code.
Principle amongst the various criteria that were set out in the Nuremberg Code was an overriding principle. The voluntary consent of the subject is essential.
Between 1947 and 1949, U.S. mind control experiments abide by this code. Only volunteers subject themselves to combinations of hypnosis, mescaline, and scopolamine. But in 1949, a shocking trial changes everything. In February 1949, Cardinal Joseph Mindszenty is put on trial in Hungary. Like the earlier Moscow show trials, the cardinal appears to be in a drugged trance.
He was a cardinal, a prince of the church, and he seemed to be confessing to crimes that seemed preposterous. And the West assumed that something had been done to him to make him confess.
The intelligence agencies were quite afraid that they were being left behind by what they considered a more sophisticated advance that the Soviets had gotten on those techniques.
The newly formed CIA begins to study ways to control the mind. The clandestine projects are given code names such as Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke. In 1950, the first real field test occurs in Japan. CIA agents secretly give a cocktail of amphetamines and barbiturates to suspected double agents. Since the subjects are unknowing, the U.S. government is in direct violation of the Nuremberg Code. With the outbreak of the Korean War, the U.S. feels more than justified when new revelations surface about Soviet and Chinese mind control. Captured U.S. pilots confess to committing germ warfare. The American public is told that the confessions are false and were extracted by a Soviet mind control technique.
The Soviets had developed this brainwashing technique that turned people into robots, that you told them what you wanted them to do and they would do it, that their minds had literally been taken away from them. The Chinese term that was used was translated as brainwash, literally wash the brain clean.
An investigation reveals that the techniques used to brainwash a POW is a good old-fashioned combination of sensory deprivation, solitary confinement, and rigorous indoctrination. But there are suspicions, never proven, that more sophisticated mind control may have been at work, particularly after one reported event in the Chinese province of Manchuria.
When American prisoners of war were marched through Manchuria, they had experienced what was called blank periods. So they had amnesia for what happened to them there.
Fears rise that the American POWs were hypnotized and may be programmed to perform acts against the United States, even programmed to assassinate. The idea of the Manchurian Candidate is born. And for the CIA, this is a call to action.
The director of Central Intelligence in April of 1953, Allen Dulles, gave a talk in which he said that we were in a battle for the control of men's minds, that's his term, and that we were losing the battle.
Dulles wastes no time in signing a secret executive order creating Project MK Ultra. The goal, to leave no stone unturned in the area of mind and behavior control.
They wanted to use the same methodology that they feared the Soviets were using, but also to get an advantage. It wasn't just a defense, it was to get one up on them.
The National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research.
In 1977, the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Health and Scientific Research, chaired by Senator Edward Kennedy, investigates claims that CIA mind control experiments in the 1950s were done on unwitting human subjects.
It was the most unreal weekend I can ever remember.
The hearing coincides with the release of 16,000 pages of declassified CIA documents about the agency's Project MK-Ultra, which ran from 1953 to 1964. It is from these documents and the findings of the subcommittee that investigators can piece together some of the projects that were part of the largest mind control program in the history of the United States.
The CIA had a division called the Technical Services Division, or Technical Services Staff, whose job is to provide the support for operations. I mean, in a James Bond movie, this is what Q used to do. It was to provide the gadgets. If you needed a sleeping powder or an itching powder or something like that, this is what they did. They did chemicals, they did biologicals, they did disguises, they did electronics, secret writing, and the like. And if there was a drug that you could slip into a drink at a party that made the person tell all their secrets, that was something that the Technical Services Division would experiment in. So the CIA's mind control was centered in this Technical Service Division, which was a backwater of the CIA.
The director of the TSS Chemical Division, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, is the first head of the MK-Ultra project. He immediately launches a full-scale investigation into the uses of a little-known hallucinogen called LSD.
It seemed to be a drug that could unlock the mysteries of the mind. And the CIA was much more interested in it as a drug that could unlock the mysteries of the mind and give somebody else control.
The first CIA-funded LSD experiments are done on paid student volunteers who know they are getting an experimental drug.
The CIA was paying for college students to be tested, and the word got around in Harvard Square that you could be paid $25 for the day to be a happy schizophrenic.
Volunteers are also solicited at a federal prison hospital in Lexington, Kentucky. Incarcerated drug addicts are rewarded with their drug of choice in exchange for their participation in the first prolonged LSD experiments.
They did give LSD to one prisoner for, I believe, 80 straight days. What they wanted to see was what was the effect of prolonged testing on somebody. And it's just unbelievable that they could have done that to somebody.
However, the CIA is concerned that the test results aren't clear because the volunteers knew they were receiving a hallucinogenic substance.
They saw that if they were going to give this drug to a Soviet under field conditions, it was obviously going to work better if the Soviet didn't know that he was receiving this drug. So in order to do unwitting operations, you needed to do unwitting testing. And the CIA cast around, who should we do the testing on?
The CIA's first solution is to have its workers slip LSD to each other.
People in the Technical Services Division had an agreement that they could give it to each other at any time. There were incidents where somebody would have their morning coffee and would get some LSD in it.
Now, 7 months into testing the drug, MK-Ultra director Sidney Gottlieb and his second-in-command, Robert Lashbrook, bring LSD to a joint CIA Army Special Operations retreat at Fort Detrick, Maryland. They tell no one at the retreat what they plan to do.
The CIA people after dinner put LSD into Cointreau, an after-dinner liqueur that was given to all the people present. One of the Army guys, Dr. Frank Olson, had a very, very bad trip. What we call now bad trip, that language didn't exist. He lost it. He thought he had gone over the edge. He couldn't get back. For whatever reason, he was not able to become who he had been before.
Olson is never told the reason is LSD. And because the unwitting victim is part of a top-secret experiment, Gottlieb and Lashbrook take charge of him themselves.
Instead of taking the guy to a hospital or taking him to see a psychiatrist who could help him understand what had happened to him, Gottlieb and Lashbrook took him to New York and consulted with an allergist who happened to be receiving CIA funding to play with LSD himself. This is not responsible behavior, and the outcome was predictable.
On September 24th, 1953, just 5 days after drinking the LSD-laced Cointreau, Robert Lashbrook reports waking up at 5:30 a.m. just in time to see Frank Olson crash through the 10th floor window of their New York hotel room at a dead run. It will be more than 20 years before Olson's widow learns that her husband was, in fact, killed by government LSD experiments.
If there had been a responsible set of controls in the agency, they would have said, hey, wait a second. Gottlieb and Lashbrook are not the guys who should be involved in doing this kind of stuff. They killed somebody. That wasn't what happened. Instead, they were given a slap on the wrist, informal reprimand, didn't even go in their personnel files. And their funding was increased, delivering one clear message: you're doing a good job, fellas.
And the notion is, in order to protect the country, in order to protect the national security of the United States, anything is justified. After Frank Olson died, it made absolutely no difference. They didn't miss a beat.
In fact, by early 1954, LSD testing on involuntary subjects is expanded. CIA agents begin looking to the general public for its next victims.
As one of them told me, who was involved in this, he said, we didn't want to do it on housewives in suburbia. We chose the people in society who could offer the least resistance and who would be least likely to expose it, or if they did expose it, it would be least likely to be believed. They went to the underworld, to people around the drug culture, to pimps, to prostitutes, to prisoners, and the like. And those were the populations that were chosen.
The CIA turns to George White for help. He is given thousands of dollars to set up covert CIA testing centers. White rents apartments in New York and San Francisco and furnishes them to look like high-class residences.
He recruited or coerced some prostitutes to work for him, and what they would do would be to give the drug to Johns in bars and then bring them back to the apartment, supposedly for sex, but also to observe how they reacted to the particular drug.
CIA researchers record the proceedings behind two-way mirrors. They have no fear of getting caught giving LSD to unwitting subjects.
And the idea was that if anyone figured out they had been drugged, they were in such a compromising position that they wouldn't report it to the police, and if they did, who would ever believe them anyway? I was drugged by a prostitute. I mean, it was almost a perfect cover.
And on top of doing this to a person, there's absolutely no follow-up. The person just disappears off into the world again, and there's no documentation as to what happens to these people. But we know for a fact from the Frank Olson case and from other examples that some people who get these doses of LSD are going to end up having serious mental health problems and even commit suicide. We know that for a fact. We just don't know the exact percentage.
At the same time, the CIA is also giving universities and other institutions hundreds of thousands of dollars to conduct research in this area.
The CIA actually knew more about LSD and the disastrous effects that it can have than anybody else at the time knew. And they were out there like a Pied Piper or a Johnny Appleseed throwing out money to encourage research in this area.
Mental hospitals are a favorite target for CIA experiments, where unknowing patients are given massive doses of LSD. The studies are so secret that often not even the patient's personal physicians know what is being tested.
What was hideous about those experiments is that they were using a population of people who were suffering from mental illnesses. And then when the people would later report to their psychologists that they felt like their minds were being controlled, this was used as a reason to keep them in the institutions even longer, although technically they were correct.
And LSD is only part of the MK Ultra story. Declassified CIA documents reveal funding between 1953 and 1964 for 149 different sub-projects, many of which combine drugs with other forms of mind control.
The basic idea is that you soften up the person's mind, and then you can get in there and use other techniques, which would include hypnosis, pain, electric shock, sensory deprivation and isolation, straight verbal brainwashing, and threats to control them and manipulate them however you want. So the drugs were just part of the mix.
In the mid-1950s, the CIA learns of just such a kitchen sink approach to mind control that's already underway at the Allen Memorial Institute at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. There, psychiatrist Dr. Ewan Cameron is attempting to cure mental illness using a process called de-patterning.
He had some ideas that if you could depattern the human mind, if you could wipe the human mind completely clean of all thoughts, then you could pattern in new behaviors.
To the CIA, depatterning also has obvious significance for intelligence work. In 1957, they begin funding Dr. Cameron's work.
What Cameron did at the CIA's instigation was to put together a specialized three-step brainwashing experiment, which was conducted on unwitting people that violated every ethical standard that the medical profession had been formulating for the past 50 years.
In 1957, the CIA begins funding the work of Canadian psychiatrist Dr. Ewan Cameron after reading about his new and radical brand of psychotherapy.
You would basically put somebody to sleep with drugs for many, many, many days, give them massive doses of electric shock therapy, literally hundreds of times the normal dosage. And basically you would reduce the person literally to a vegetable. And the idea clinically was you would wipe out either delusions or depression or psychiatric symptoms, and then when the person came back to their normal self, which would take months and months and months, the psychiatric symptoms would be gone.
This kind of clinically induced amnesia is of special interest to the CIA. Dr. Cameron agrees to take his treatment one step further. In addition to depatterning his client, he would attempt to repattern in new thoughts and behaviors.
The CIA funded this experiment because if you could take a person who was an enemy agent, erase that personality and put in a new personality, you have a convert.
At the CIA's instigation, Cameron devises a three-step brainwashing experiment.
The three parts consisted of, first, what he called depatterning, which was the use of LSD and intensive electroshocks. So that's phase one, is wiping the slate clean. Second was trying to program in new patterns of behavior by playing tape-recorded messages hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times. The final phase was a 2 to 3 week period where Cameron would put patients to sleep using barbiturates to try to suppress any recollection of what had been done to them.
It sounds crazy, it sounds like a Frankenstein-type process, but the fact is he was president of the American Psychiatric Association and nobody called his act at the time. In fact, he did it to his paying patients. People paid for this treatment. And unbelievable kind of thing. There were screams coming out of the hospital, that wing. I interviewed nurses and doctors who said, we thought something was going on, but you couldn't question Dr. Cameron.
Between 1957 and 1964, Dr. Cameron conducts his mind control experiments on hundreds of unwitting victims, including Linda McDonald.
Friends have told me, because I don't have any memory of that life that I lived, I probably had postpartum depression, but nobody could really pin it down because it didn't last. And so it took about 2 years in and out of my GP's, my general practitioner's office, to finally say, look, we can't figure it out. We don't know what's the matter with you. Why don't you go to Montreal? There's this famous doctor there, and he'll give you an assessment.
In 1963, at age 25, Linda McDonald is suffering from what we know today were classic symptoms of postpartum depression. She goes to Dr. Ewan Cameron for a 3-week evaluation.
Within 3 weeks, he diagnosed me as an acute schizophrenic. And he told the children's father that unless the children's father agreed to let me have this treatment, which he didn't go into any detail discussing, then I would be institutionalized for the rest of my life.
It's before we started talking about informed consent notions and so on. The doctor said, do this, you did it.
One of the great ironies for me of the whole Cameron CIA story is that the people who were victimized thought they were going to the finest psychiatric hospital in Canada. Most of them were not suffering from profound schizophrenia or some psychiatric disorder that might justify some of the more intrusive techniques that were used on them. These were people who were suffering from run-of-the-mill common psychiatric ailments.
Only by reading her medical records can Linda know what happened to her more than 30 years ago. It begins in April 1963 with a de-patterning program conducted in what Cameron calls the sleep room.
He sent me to the sleep room, and in 5 weeks I had 109 electroconvulsive shock treatments.
And each time she got a treatment, she got 6 times the normal dose. So that was literally over 600 times the normal dose that you would get in one ECT treatment.
And mega doses of hallucinogenic drugs, LSD included, all at the same time. I had 86 comatose days, deep coma sleep. And when I woke up 5 weeks later, this is according to my file, because of course I can't remember any of this, I was a vegetable. I'd never been in this world before. I was a baby completely. I didn't know who I was. I was incontinent. I didn't know anything.
During repatterning, Linda is dosed with a number of hallucinogenic drugs and depressants while a speaker under her pillow plays a continuous audio loop.
The tape loops that were over and over and over and over were literally for weeks at a time.
He was trying to drive my previous life out, to take it to zero, and the objective was to then put another personality into this vegetable. Now, I don't know whether he succeeded, because I don't know how much of the life that I've lived, certainly in the 10 years after, was being dictated by messages in my head. I don't know, and I'll never know.
When Linda McDonald is released from Allen Memorial 5 months later, she has no memory of life before Dr. Cameron.
At the end of the massive ECT treatment, the de-patterning, and so on, she was unable to recognize her husband, didn't know that she was married, couldn't state her own name, had no idea where she was or what year it was.
The children at this time were being taken care of because, of course, I was younger than all of these children. I had a big grown-up body, and chronologically I was 26 years old, but I'd only been in this world a few months.
After her release, Linda McDonald receives no follow-up treatment from Dr. Cameron. Other doctors refuse to take her case.
A lot of doctors knew or had a sense that something very covert, unhealthy was happening at the Allen Memorial with Dr. Cameron, and they just did not want to have anything to do with anybody or any file or any connection.
You got to remember, it's not just that they were used as experimental guinea pigs in untested and damaging experiments. They were denied therapies that could have helped them.
Slowly, on her own, Linda McDonald begins to create a new life for herself, completely unaware of what she now knows about the treatments she received.
The children's father taught me to read and to play the guitar again. I used to know how to do that in the other life. And to drive the car, and my sister-in-law taught me how to cook. She taught me how to scramble eggs, and I was so excited about that.
In 1984, Linda sees an article in her local newspaper about a lawsuit against the CIA and Allen Memorial. The litigants are 9 former patients of Dr. Ewen Cameron.
I'll never forget it, because there was a picture of this man and then this big caption that said, Dr. Ewen Cameron, brainwashing Allen Memorial, all over the front page. Well, my heart stopped, because I knew he was my doctor. I knew that's where I'd been. And I started to read. And by the end of the page, I was just shaking. I was absolutely traumatized.
Linda files her own lawsuit and joins over 80 former Cameron patients who will eventually be awarded compensation by the Canadian government. Among the victims is Velma Orlikov, the wife of a Canadian member of Parliament. But for every involuntary human subject who is able to uncover his or her role in CIA experiments, experts believe there are many more who will never know.
There's been thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people subjected to really damaging, unethical experimentation.
And indeed thousands of people who have suffered as a result of government mind control experiments are probably 99% unaware.
Beginning in the fall of 1963, there is little that can be known about U.S. government mind control experiments. That's when MK Ultra is replaced by Project MK Search, which absorbs many of the ongoing mind control experiments. Dr. Ewan Cameron continues his depatterning treatments until mid-1964, when he suddenly and unexpectedly retires. He dies of a heart attack while mountain climbing in 1967. MK Search continues until 1972, as do companion mind control projects funded by the Army, Navy, and Air Force. There, the paper trail gets very cold.
In 1972, when Richard Holmes was leaving the CIA, he did a lot of destruction of documents. The mind control records were among those ordered to be destroyed.
In 1975, after President Ford appoints the Rockefeller Commission to investigate past CIA abuses, including their drug program, reporter John Marks begins searching for any remaining CIA documents relating to mind control experiments.
When the climate had changed because there had been congressional committees investigating the CIA and the like, I filed this Freedom of Information request, which tried to find these particular records. Somebody out in the archives discovered 4 or 5 boxes of records, which were mainly the financial records and with the justifications that went along with them.
It is these financial records that form the basis for what we now know.
I would love to have full knowledge, but those who knew weren't telling, and I took this as far as I could.
I would say we probably know about 30% of what the CIA did. Those experiments stopped, however, in terms of the record available to us in the maybe early to mid-1970s. I don't know any researcher who's had any success in finding anything out about CIA experiments since then.
And we may never know, because what's left of these documents is currently classified.
One of the real fundamental abuses of secrecy in our government still today is the misuse of national security, not to protect information that actually has some bearing on the national defense of our country, like how to make an atomic bomb, but rather to hide misconduct and embarrassment about misdeeds that have been done by the government.
This is not a pleasant world we live in. You know, and there are a lot of nasty people and things in the world, and we need protection from them. But you don't get protection by becoming the guinea pigs of the forces you pay to protect you. And you can't save your mind by having the people who protect you take your mind.
But secrets die hard, and so do the men who keep the secrets.
Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, when I deposed him in Virginia several years ago, he was completely unrepentant. And it's chilling to sit across the table from the man who was the architect of so much human suffering and have him say, I was just a patriot.
One of the great tragedies is that no professional organization has censured any of its members for their involvement in these proceedings. Nobody has lost a job as a result of it. Nobody has lost status or prestige as a result of it. And therefore the message is, do it, because you won't be punished for it.
And the question remains, is the government still doing it?
One of the things that was interesting during the 50s is they were 10 years ahead of the popular research effort. My guess is that they've tried to stay that far ahead. In fact, they would say they've been irresponsible. They're not doing their jobs well if they haven't stayed that far ahead of the curve.
We know from articles in U.S. News and World Report and a magazine called Defense Electronics that there's a lot of experimentation and development of non-lethal weapons right up to the present. Non-lethal weapons are various forms of energy and radiation, sound, electromagnetic, and so on. They're beamed at a target's head or at other areas of the body to control their behavior, make them sick, disable them in some way without killing them.
But is it being tested on unknowing subjects, as it was so abusively in the 1950s?
What we know for a fact now from a wide range of documentation is that there's been experimentation on unwitting civilians involving biological weapons, radiation experimentation, LSD, and other forms of mind control experimentation. Given all of that, it's basically implausible that there hasn't been some experimentation on unwitting citizens using non-lethal weapons technology.
The present speculation has its basis in the facts of the past.
What brainwashing and mind control experimentation have taught us in the 20th century is a rather cruel paradox that for every advance we make in mental medicine, we can take a step backward for people who want to use those advances for purposes of control.
We're using a standard, we're using a prism to judge this stuff that didn't exist at the time. Now, that doesn't justify everything, and there are gross human rights violations available here, but I think at this point it's a chapter that the United States would be better to close.
What we really need now is a really thorough public review of the history of medical and psychiatric contracting for mind control purposes. We need all this out on the table. We need it acknowledged.
Otherwise, experts say, history is doomed to repeat itself and bring to pass a prophecy made by Aldous Huxley in his 1932 novel, Brave New World.
Brave New World said we're going to voluntarily turn over our minds and our beliefs and our thoughts to people. And Huxley was right. Unless we do something to protect our own individual integrity, or at least our children.
The Illuminati, through their intelligence agencies, have declared a covert war on the American people. Here's CIA MKUltra hearings, survivor testimony, March 15th, 1995.
I'm Christy Nicola, born July of 1962, rendering me 32 years of age. I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. My parents were divorced around 1966, and Donald Richard Ebner, my natural father, was involved with Dr. Green in the experiments. I was a subject from 1966 to 1976. Dr. Green performed radiation experiments on me in 1970, focusing on my neck, throat, and chest, 1972 focusing on my chest, and my uterus in 1975. Each time I became dizzy, nauseous, and threw up. All these experiments were performed on me in conjunction with mind control techniques and drugs in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Green was using me mostly as a mind control subject from 1966 to 1973. His objective was to gain control of my mind and train me to be a spy assassin. The first significant memory took place at Kansas City University in 1966. Don Ebner took me there by plane when my mom was out of town. I was in what looked like a laboratory, and there seemed to be other children. I was strapped down, naked, spread eagle, on a table, on my back. Dr. Green had electrodes on my body, including my head. He used what looked like an overhead projector and repeatedly said he was burning different images into my brain while a red light flashed aimed at my forehead. In between each sequence, he used electric shock on my body and told me to go deeper and deeper, while repeating each image would go deeper into my brain, and I would do whatever he told me to do. I felt drugged because he had given me a shot before he started the procedure. When it was over, he gave me another shot. The next thing I remember, I was with my grandparents again in Tucson, Arizona. I was 4 years old. You can see from this experiment that Dr. Green used trauma, drugs, post-hypnotic suggestion, and more trauma in an effort to gain total control of my mind. He used me in radiation experiments both for the purposes of determining the effects of radiation on various parts of my body and to terrorize me as an additional trauma in the mind control experiments. The rest of the experiments took place in Tucson, Arizona, out in the desert. I was taught how to pick locks, be secretive, use my photographic memory, and a technique to withhold information by repeating numbers to myself. Dr. Green moved on to wanting me to kill dolls that look like real children. I stabbed a doll with a spear once after being severely traumatized, but the next time I refused. He used many pain induction techniques, but as I got older, I resisted more and more. He often tied me down in a cage, which was near his office. Between 1972 and 1976, he and his assistants were sometimes careless and left the cage unlocked. Whenever physically possible, I snuck into his office and found files with reports and memos addressed to CIA and military personnel. Included in these files were project, subproject, subject, and experiment names with some code numbers for radiation and mind control experiments, which I have submitted in your written documentation. I was caught twice, and Dr. Green ruthlessly used electric shock, drugs, spun me on a table, put shots in my stomach and my back, dislocated my joints, and hypnotic techniques to make me feel crazy and suicidal. Because of my rebellion and growing lack of cooperation, they gave up on me as a spy assassin. Consequently, the last 2 years, 1974 to 1976, Dr. Green used various mind control techniques to reverse the spy assassin messages to self-destruct and death messages. His purpose? He wanted me dead, and I struggled to stay alive all of my adult life. I believe it is by the grace of God that I am still alive. These horrible experiments have profoundly affected my life. I developed multiple personality disorder because Dr. Green's goal was to split my mind into as many parts as possible so he could control me totally. He failed, but I've had to endure years of constant physical, mental, and emotional pain, even to this day. I've been in therapy consistently for 12 years, and it wasn't until I found my current therapist 2.5 years ago who had knowledge of the mind control experiments that I've finally been able to make real progress and begin to heal. In closing, I ask that you keep in mind that the memories I've described are but a glimpse of the countless others that took place over the 10 years between 1966 and 1976. That they weren't just radiation, but mind control and drug experiments as well. I have included more detailed information of what I remember in your written documentation. Please help us by recommending an investigation and making the information available so that therapists and other mental health professionals can help more people like myself. I know I can get better. I am getting better. And I know others can too, with the proper help. Please help us in an effort to prevent these heinous acts from continuing in the future. Thank you very much.
Now this is Dr. David Bishop, whom taught at Pima Community College. I was in a few of his classes. And in those classes, Jared Lee Loeffner, the man whom shot Gabrielle Giffords, was also present. And I remember after Loeffner shot Giffords, I walked into Dr. David Bishop's office to discuss Jared Lee Loeffner. And Dr. David Bishop acted like he didn't know who I was talking about. And I thought that was very odd because I talked to Dr. David Bishop all the time, and so did Jared Lee Loeffner. And this is Jared Lee Loeffner. After the shooting, he shaved his head and began to act out of character. I talked to Jared Lee Loeffner personally, as I was in the same classes as him, and so was Dr. David Bishop. But what always stayed in my mind was, why would Dr. David Bishop act like he didn't know who Loeffner was when he did? This led me to believe that Dr. Bishop was Jared Lee Loeffner's handler. At the time, I didn't know much about Monarch programming. But now I know that it is being used to create mass shootings by these Monarch mind-controlled assassins. This lady's holding a sign of all the mass shootings that have taken place in the United States. And what does the government and media offer as a solution to these mass shootings? It's always the same. More gun control. They want to disarm the American people. This is the reason that the CIA is releasing these Monarch programmed assassins to carry out mass shootings and push public opinion into banning guns, which is the New World Order's goal. More mass shootings are on the way, and you're going to see them in the mainstream media, who is going to continuously be calling for more gun control, and so is the government, until they can finally convince Americans to willingly relinquish their weapons, their firearms. And the CIA will continue to release these Monarch mind-controlled programmed assassins that are going to carry out mass shootings. And it's going to keep happening. And you're going to see it on the news. Just keep your eyes open, ladies and gentlemen, and stay armed yourself so you are not a victim.
Total mind control, Manchurian candidates. Could such things actually be possible? Could someone you know, or perhaps even yourself, have hidden programmed identities deep within the mind?
Imagine finding out that you've got disassociated parts of yourself that are Satanists.
Not only is it possible, it is happening now and on an unimaginable scale.
MK Ultra mind control rules in Hollywood.
Some celebrities, professional athletes, spies, politicians, as well as common citizens, police officers, taxi drivers, etc., are under total mind control, undetectable slavery.
This mind control is totally undetectable.
These mind control victims have multiple fragmented identities capable of carrying out a variety of tasks with no later memory of the event. Most never discover what they truly are or how they have been controlled. Mind control is a sliding scale and can come in many forms, from everyday information control as we see with the corporate-controlled media, to brainwashing, to drugs, hypnosis, and total mind control. The most extreme form of mind control, trauma-based mind control, uses hypnosis, torture, and drugs to create a total mind-controlled slave. The brain, being the incredible computer that it is, creates amnesic barriers around events that would be too damaging for the conscious mind to process. Often, a returning veteran will be unable to remember parts of his deployment. Someone injured in a horrific car accident will likely not remember the entire ordeal. The brain walls off memories surrounding events much like the partitioning of a computer hard drive. By taking advantage of this mechanism within the brain, programmers can create completely dissociated parts within the mind that function totally unaware of one another. The secret lies in dissociation. This special ability within the mind is what allows Navy SEALs to lie motionless for extreme periods, Indian fakirs to walk on red-hot coals, and, as the Spanish learned during the Inquisition, prevent some from feeling pain during torture. Multiple personality disorder, now called DID, is caused by trauma at a young age and can be created deliberately or by accident. Most people can dissociate to some degree, but only a few can create completely dissociated identities. These are the people mind control programmers look for: a dissociative. When put under extreme conditions, why do some people survive and not others? What gives some the ability to rise to the occasion? It is an ability, what some call a gift, and through trauma, this ability can be honed, developed, so that the person becomes more than what they were before: a monarch. It was discovered that this ability could be passed genetically from one generation to the next. Children of multi-generational abuse, for instance, already have a well-developed ability to dissociate. Elite bloodline families traveled to exotic locales such as India and Tibet to study Eastern philosophy, especially yogis and the Tibetan Buddhist, who have an excellent ability to dissociate. They learned the secrets of abuse, dissociation, and its hereditary properties, and set out to pass this gift from generation to generation, a practice that continues to this day. One of the key tip-offs for scientists that memory and dissociation could be passed from one generation to the next was the monarch butterfly. Each year, Monarch butterflies from across North America make an incredible journey. From as far north as Canada, millions of butterflies descend on a small plot of land in Mexico for the winter. Once spring arrives, they begin the long journey back. The kicker? It takes 3 generations of monarchs to make the 2,500-mile journey. No butterfly making the return journey has ever flown that route before. So how do they know where to go? The answer lies in what researchers call epigenetic memory. Memories learned by parents, which are then passed genetically to their children. Due to their remarkable ability to pass information genetically, as well as the fluttering feeling often described during dissociation, the monarch butterfly is the international symbol for trauma-based mind control. Trauma-based mind control victims are told to think of the programming experience as that of going into a cocoon. The cocoon is not pleasant, but as a result, a beautiful butterfly emerges. Victims tend to identify with the monarch butterfly. For this reason, the deliberate creation of programmed alter identities is known as monarch programming. Once aware, one will begin to notice butterfly symbolism at an alarming frequency in popular media and culture. Originally, only old occult families possessed the ability to completely dissociate and create multiples. Elite families to this day breed with other such families who have also been into ritual child abuse. This is where secret societies and occult groups come in. Organizations which have, throughout generations, not only curated and cultivated this secret knowledge, but facilitated its practice. These families are multi-generational Satanist, meaning that each generation has belonged to a satanic coven of some kind going back centuries, and the creation of multiples is part of rituals they have performed since antiquity. Programmers have codified these ancient practices into a specific methodology for the deliberate creation of multiple personalities, also known as trauma-based mind control. The ability to dissociate and create multiples only grows stronger with each generation that is subjected to abuse. These elite families view the ability to dissociate as a valuable endowment that must be passed carefully from one generation to the next. While this ability may be passed genetically, it must be activated through childhood trauma. Without the trauma that abuse and torture create, the mind never fully develops its dissociative ability to the point of creating multiples. Extensive testing is done at a young age to gauge their ability to dissociate. Programmers will not spend time trying to split a mind that cannot dissociate. It would be a waste. Once the programmers have built a good dissociative ability and highly hypnotizable base, they can exploit this mechanism within the mind to create alter identities completely tailored to their liking. While only 20% of the general population is easily hypnotized, trauma makes one highly hypnotizable. Through trauma and hypnosis, multiple dissociated parts will be created. Some will think they are little children, animals, or even gems and stones. Each one will have their own talents and abilities to lend to the set of alters known as the system. These alters can now be called up at any time their handler wishes, by a code phrase, color, or sound. Once these alters have been created and triggers implanted correctly, the programmer has essentially a human robot. But how are these human robots used, and for what nefarious purposes? All that and more after this. For what purpose would government and private organizations create these human robots? The mind control victims are programmed to perform any command, no matter how painful or demeaning, without pause or emotion, and are capable of remembering endless lists of information or record and play back conversations exactly like a tape recorder. A killing machine with superhuman strength, stamina, and fighting abilities. They will have no regret or remorse because they won't be able to remember it. These high-level mind-controlled slaves are expensive and time-consuming to create, but if done correctly, can be the perfect assassin, actress, golf player, sex slave, patsy, or soldier. Some elite create program multiples to be used in porn, snuff films, or as celebrity cash cows, earning their owners many times what they cost to create. Performers have grueling schedules, 15 or more hours a day, sometimes across multiple time zones. It helps if they have the extreme stamina these programmed multiples possess. When the front personality gets exhausted, another identity can take its place. Many in the entertainment industry, both male and female, are mind-controlled multiples.
I go to Hollywood parties, or occasionally I go to Oscar parties and things like that, and people, big stars, people will grab me by the arm and take me aside and say, "I just want to thank you for the things you say." And it blows my mind, but that's the culture. It's a culture of fear for sure. And it's a big culture of mind control too. MK Ultra mind control rules in Hollywood. If you don't know, Google that and look into it.
Imagine creating a soldier that could stay up for days on end, possess superhuman strength, stamina, and fighting abilities. Or a spy whose front alter was just a mild-mannered archaeologist. If ever captured and pressed for information, these super soldiers, spies, could never access any sensitive information within their system, and would likely switch into alters who would not only enjoy the torture, but taunt their abuser. This has a powerful psychological effect on the enemy. A common role for those subjected to trauma-based mind control is that of a courier. Handlers pull up an alter identity within the system, who records word for word a conversation or message, which can then be sealed with a passphrase and sent to deliver the clandestine message. Mind control victim Kathy O'Brien talks extensively about her use as a secret courier, among other things, for President Reagan. Like an addict needing a stronger hit, the ruling elite must turn to increasingly bizarre and disturbing sex acts to satisfy their fiendish obsessions. High-level mind control multiples usually have sexual alters, known as betas, trained to satisfy the perversions of the elite. If necessary, mind-controlled multiples can create new alters on the spot to perform a particularly odious task. Monarch slaves are frequently used in snuff films and other sick porn distributed through the black market or dark web. Known as beta alters, these personalities are void of any inhibitions. Hypersexualized personalities, oftentimes in the form of a cat, are used for porn, prostitution, and even as party favors. This is what Stanley Kubrick portrayed in his controversial film Eyes Wide Shut, which featured an elite occult sex party that eerily mirrored that of an actual private event held by the Rothschilds in the 70s. A common use for male monarch slaves is that of a patsy or lone nut. These sleeper agents can be called up and told to be at a certain place at a certain time, and they will obey robotically. Many mind-controlled slaves have excellent marksman alters programmed inside. Others merely show up afterwards and take the blame.
John Lennon is dead, shot several times by a young American as he was going into his home in New York.
After killing John Lennon, Mark David Chapman calmly pulled out a copy of Catcher in the Rye and began reading. Later, Reagan's attempted assassin would also be apprehended in the same book. Lee Harvey Oswald was found with only 4 books in his possession, one of which was, you guessed it, Catcher in the Rye. In the 1997 thriller Conspiracy Theory, Mel Gibson, possibly a multiple himself, plays a crazed CIA mind control victim obsessed with Catcher in the Rye. Mind control researchers have suggested Salinger's classic novel was used as a mind control programming tool. Another useful role for programmed multiples is that of an agent provocateur, one whose job it is to infiltrate organizations or groups, spy, and create disruption and infighting. Monarch slaves will often have an alter identity that records everything the person hears and can repeat it all back to a handler. This makes them quite useful as a mole. They will have a personality who is programmed to genuinely want to join whatever group they would like to infiltrate, be it religious or political organization or even a business. Their personal beliefs and views will align with the chosen organization, so much so that they not only fit in but become valued members. All the while, unknowingly, alters are reporting back to whatever agency or secret society to which they may secretly belong. Trauma-based mind control victims are often used as drug mules to transport illicit substances across state lines and around the world. Convincing front alters would honestly believe they were carrying makeup powder or whatever they have been hypnotically programmed to think. The globalist cabal of elite controllers who make up the secret societies, military intelligence agencies, and banking cartels ruthlessly pursue control over those they deem important to their plans. A popular form of domination is blackmail. Monarch slaves are often sent to seduce a politician, world leader, or anyone considered important to the hierarchy's agenda. Once compromised, these people will now be completely controlled under the threat of pictures or video being released. Sometimes compromised individuals will be cultivated to highly powerful positions because they are completely controlled by the horrible crimes for which they are being blackmailed. This is exactly what happened recently with Dennis Hassert before he was thrown under the bus and it all came to light. Hassert was a high school gym coach with a grungy armchair next to the boys' shower. He became a politician and was elevated to Speaker of the House, all while being totally controlled by blackmail because of his previous child abuse.
Do you know who comes after the vice president in ascension to be the president? The Speaker of the House. Dennis Hassert came from nowhere as a high school wrestling coach, courted to become a key member of Congress and then the Speaker of the House from nowhere. And why was that? Because he was part of the pedophile guild that loves to rape young boys. And that big, disgusting sack of rotten horse pus, no words can describe him, that's too easy. Dennis Hassert gets 1 year for paying hush money to a bunch of kids on the high school and middle school wrestling team.
Monarch multiples are not single-purpose appliances, but biological robots containing alters capable of performing any task their programmer might anticipate. While Monarch Mind Control is solely a 20th century creation, its predecessors date back to ancient Egypt and Babylon. The Egyptian Book of the Dead explicitly described methods of torture and intimidation to create trauma, the use of drugs and hypnotism, ultimately resulting in total enslavement of the initiate. It would, however, be the Nazis and their sinister scientist who turned dissociation into a science and mind control into an art. Psychiatrists such as the notorious Dr. Joseph Mengele conducted horrific experiments on concentration camp inmates in an effort to refine their mind control techniques. Many Holocaust survivors had nightmares of Mengele and the experiments they had been a part of. Some loved him as a father figure all their lives due to the trauma bonding they had received as part of their programming. They discovered that through traumatization, different personalities or dissociated parts could be created who do not know each other, but can take the body at different times. After the war, these Nazi psychiatrists were brought to the US through what was known as Project Paperclip. Project Paperclip was the code name under which the US intelligence and military services extracted German Nazi scientists during and after the final stages of World War II. Mengele, along with other Nazi doctors and psychiatrists, now continued to experiment and develop trauma-based mind control for the Americans. Under what would later become known as MKUltra, the United States government systematically drugged, tortured, and murdered their own citizens for decades. Exposed in the 70s through lawsuits filed by Canadian survivors, MKUltra ultimately included over 150 operations, all relating to behavior modification, trauma, brainwashing, drugs, blackmail, and mind control experiments. Among these mind control experiments orchestrated by Nazi war criminals were continuations of the trauma-based programming which creates dissociated identities. Rape, electroshock, drugs, and hypnosis were all used by the CIA to create their very own mind-controlled multiples. A criminal faction within the US government, devoid of any conscious or feeling of personal responsibility, tortured and programmed children to create valuable mind control assets. The CIA's original plans to research mind control was to determine psychological and chemical means of creating the perfect spy, which quickly evolved into production of the perfect soldier, perfect assassin, and eventually, slave. With the introduction of Nazi research, particularly that of SS officer and occultic Heinrich Himmler and Joseph Mengele, it was determined that absolute mind control could be reached through specific tortures beginning at a young age. Armed with this nefarious information, US, German, and British psychiatrists embarked on a new yet ancient form of total mind control. Disturbingly, instead of ending in 1973 as the US government claims, closer research shows the program merely evolved into what was known as Project Monarch. MKUltra was a broad study into a wide variety of mind control techniques, and Monarch was its logical outgrowth, taking the most effective methodologies and applying them to the creation of a total mind-controlled slave, a true Manchurian candidate. Today, mind control multiples are still being created at a scale never before imagined. They are in all walks of life. The entertainment industry in particular is known to be filled with Monarch multiples. One reason mind control is prevalent within the entertainment industry is because they are able to control the powerful influence these entertainers possess over the public. Not only can messages disseminated through music and films be controlled, they can then have celebrities create distractions to divert public attention. Many entertainers have shown scars and behavior consistent with that of trauma-based mind control victims. Today, a multitude of groups and organizations are performing trauma-based mind control on victims of all walks of life. But how are these mind control multiples created? In just a moment, the disturbing details. The hideous process of creating a monarch typically begins at a young age. Children of elite, multi-generational occultic families will be traumatized starting in the womb, sometimes even going so far as to induce a premature birth. Experts have likened splitting the mind to splitting wood. Getting an initial split going is rather difficult, but once you have a crack beginning to form, it gets easier with each strike. Likewise, the elite know that if they can traumatize the mind when it is young, it will split easier and dissociate more quickly. For this reason, elite families will put a mousetrap on their baby's hand while in the crib, and not go into the room to remove it until the infant stops crying. This teaches the baby's mind to dissociate from pain, which is then rewarded with mommy's attention. If not born into this madness, testing will typically take place to gauge the ability to dissociate. Sometimes, people from domestically abusive environments will be chosen specifically because of their heightened dissociative abilities. The second aspect that must be considered is IQ. A great deal of intelligence and creativity is required to create these dissociated personalities. Personality tests, along with IQ, ultimately determine the child's future role. Once the candidate has been selected, preparation will begin. While multi-generational victims inherit the mental structuring required to begin programming, others must be conditioned. Controllers will begin expanding the child's mind as soon as it is born, teaching it not only to create images, but associate a smell or sound with memory. Creativity and intelligence are gently enhanced. The child will be taught discipline and trained to be able to hold still and keep their eyes open for long periods. This will be helpful later during EEG testing. For the first year and a half, the Monarch child is smothered with love, in what is known as the love bombing phase. Once a good ability to dissociate and an IQ of at least 120 is confirmed, programmers will proceed with the first step, shattering the core. In direct contrast to the absolute love and attention the child has received thus far, he or she will now be alone, tortured, and abused. Loud noise and various smells will overwhelm the brain's sensory input. After some time, the primary programmer or handler, who has thus far shown only kindness towards the child, will arrive. To the victim, this is a welcome sight. It appears help has arrived. This time, however, the programmer will brutally traumatize the victim. The shock shatters the mind like glass. The brain simply cannot reconcile these two extremely opposite behaviors from the same person. The cognitive dissonance is too great. Experts have learned this is how the core is split. Once the splitting of the core is accomplished, the mind can be divided and compartmentalized through further abuse and trauma. As the victim's programming begins, it is meticulously monitored, charts are kept, and programming schedules are set. Programmers will use specific tortures to create splits. The conscious mind, which makes us who we are, takes flight and essentially says, I can't handle anymore, I'm out of here. When this happens, the unconscious is left wide open, and the victim is left in a dangerously suggestible state. Dissociation creates the opening of the unconscious. This vulnerable state is characterized by rapid eye movement, heightened sensitivity to shadows or surrounding movement. The subject is highly hypnotizable and can be told to create new parts within its mind. The fractured, dissociated mind has no ability to question what is being told.
You get tortured far enough or traumatized far enough, your dominant personality just goes to sleep. And what's left, and this is a normal human reaction to excessive trauma to protect you, and what's left is a very childlike persona of yourself from when you were about 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And you have no ability to resist, you're vulnerable, and then that's when they hypnotize you. Dissociation is the key to all this.
In this state, it is easy for the victim to go into shock and die, so life signs are closely monitored. Should anything go wrong, programming centers are well equipped to resuscitate the victim. According to author and researcher Fritz Springmeier, sensory overload via lights, sounds, and smells are all used to help put the brain into a dissociative programmable state. With each new split, new alters can be created to reflect whatever the programmer wants: white fluffy rabbits, kittens, people, or even a doorknob. Movies featuring animal characters and anthropomorphic objects such as candlesticks, doorknobs, aid the young mind in creating these dehumanized identities. Some alters will be perpetual toddlers, others will be allowed to mature with age. All serve a purpose within the system. Ritualistic abuse, such as that found in satanic cults, is itself a trauma. The chanting, incense robes, and sheer terror frequently create a split. A skilled hypnotherapist can input phrases, codes, and specific tones used to trigger the newly created alter at any time. Some programming centers have elaborate facilities designed for maximum hypnotic and lighting effect. Heated saltwater sensory deprivation tanks create weightlessness and put subjects into an out-of-body state, which can then be used by programmers to speak directly to the unconscious mind. A Monarch Multiple's mind will be divided into many parts. If the programmer wishes, a single trauma could create 10 or more similar alters, the strongest few of which will be developed and programmed for various purposes. Alter systems are kept in place via an elaborate web of anchors, threats, and hypnotic reinforcement. When the smell of freshly baked bread evokes a childhood memory and results in feelings of happiness, that is known as an emotional anchor. Our lives are filled with emotional anchors that produce a certain emotional state. Anchors are often familiar smells or sounds, like, for instance, that of an alarm clock. Programmers have developed an advanced understanding of how the mind and all its idiosyncrasies create emotional anchors, which can then be used to trigger the slave.
They pick up the phone one day, they hear the words "red dog," and this is a post-hypnotic suggestion that makes them act out some covert plan.
For instance, the smell of a certain incense may serve as an anchor to trigger a satanic altar programmed through ritual abuse. Everyday symbols such as diamonds, infinity loops, and song lyrics are used to reinforce the victim's programming. Most front altars are programmed not to remember their abuse, and the fear of remembering helps reinforce their programming, preventing the mind from pulling itself together. The roots of all thoughts, emotions, and behaviors is a connection between neurons within the brain. Neurons communicate via electrical impulses called brainwaves, which vary depending on the subject's state of mind. Brainwaves are like musical notes. The low-frequency waves resonate deeply like a penetrating drum beat, while the higher-frequency brainwaves are a high-pitched flute. Brainwaves change frequency according to what we're doing and feeling. Alters are programmed in at each frequency. Alpha is the regular programming known as base personality modification. It is characterized by extremely pronounced memory retention, substantially increased physical strength, and several times visual acuity. Alpha is used to train and condition the perfect spy. These alters can have up to 40 times visual acuity and 5 times the physical strength of a normal man. These are used for corporate and government espionage because of their photographic recall and ability to record volumes of information. They can also be used to store data like a computer. Some alters are used to record volumes of sports statistics so they can be shown off and used as entertainment at parties. Beta is the sexual programming level, void of inhibitions or moral convictions. These alters are often cat-like. Known as sex kittens, many female entertainers have beta programming. Billionaires and power brokers will pay huge sums to sleep with a gorgeous celebrity, so getting a monarch slave into the entertainment industry can be very lucrative for their owners. The delta wavelength is used to program super soldiers and assassins. The programming is designed to create agents devoid of fear or self-preservation, capable of incredible feats of physical endurance and hand-to-hand combat. One who kills, and if caught, self-destructs. Programmed at the Delta level are trained assassins. For those who refuse to accept that US intelligence would torture their own people, simply imagine the value and effectiveness of a marksman with 40 times visual acuity and unparalleled skill and determination. Some of these hidden alters are highly trained super soldiers who complete their mission and return home never remembering the event.
You could have a person who would be able to commit assassinations for you or do any other kind of important work like courier work. And if they get caught, you can just give them up. It's not a problem because they themselves don't even know what they did. It's the ultimate tool for any spy agency.
Others, once their mission is complete, are programmed to await arrest or kill themselves, such as lone gunmen. According to whistleblowers and researchers, military intelligence, CIA, secret societies such as the Freemasons, satanic cults, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and British intelligence are some of the primary organizations carrying out mind control today. However, only a fraction of those associated with these agencies ever have knowledge of such programs. But how do organizations, individuals, and cults committing these atrocities obtain their victims? The frightening answer after this. Where do the victims of horrific total mind control come from? Some are born into intergenerational abusive families, where abuse and dissociation has been carried on for many generations. Jay-Z states in his song Spiritual, "Pray your father's father wasn't touching his little daughter, creating transgenerational trauma, that shit'll haunt ya." The transgenerational trauma to which Jay-Z is referring is known as epigenetic memory. Epigenetic memory is trauma stored in DNA passed on through generations, and is what allows these families to pass on the ability to dissociate. This is why children from old European satanic Luciferian families are sought after for programming. Monarch victim Bryce Taylor wrote in her book Thanks for the Memories that she, as a little girl, would be used to lure other children into a vehicle for kidnapping.
I can publicly testify that what these children are saying is reality. And I can also say that I was used even as a child on Ventura Boulevard near the Corbin Bowl to coerce children that were my age into black sedans where the men had TVs and candy and all kinds of things that I was told to lure children into the cars, and they would happen to be shopping with their mom, walking along the boulevard there, and then I would say something like, would you like some candy? And there's a TV in the back of this car, do you want to come and see it? And as soon as this child would approach the car, the men would throw them in the back seat and take off. And then often I witnessed as these children would be kept contained in cages.
The actual number of missing children and adults in the US and Canada is mind-blowing. While Monarch victims have down-to-earth convincing front alters, many of their alter identities exist in some form of sci-fi world that keeps their slaves far from reality and their true identity. The scripts of popular movies are often used to solidify the fantasy world within the victim's mind. A mind control script is like the operating software upon which the rest of the system is built. The most common mind control scripts include Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, Star Wars, Star Trek, and Alien Abduction, among others. On these fictional scripts, programmers build entire worlds into which the alters are placed. The victim's mind is so tormented they will accept anything. They are told to construct in their mind completely fictional worlds in which alters dwell. Victims often contain Alice in Wonderland or Wizard of Oz themed programming. These storylines work perfectly for the theme of dissociation, as both characters enter alternate universes ultimately created within their own mind. The same occurs with Monarch programming. Victims are told to escape deeper into their own mind to a fictional world of the programmer's creating. To escape the tortures, alters go over the rainbow, or in the case of Alice in Wonderland, through the looking glass. This is when the conscious mind takes flight. Military monarchs commonly have Star Wars or Star Trek themed programming. It is not uncommon for monarch victims to be obsessed with these fictional worlds. They may know entire parts by heart or spend hours totally immersed in the Star Wars, Star Trek universe and know countless intricate details about them. Another popular theme for trauma-based mind control is alien abduction. Many of those who report abduction stories are in fact victims of trauma-based mind control. The brain instinctively wants to pull itself back together, and the more distance the alters are from reality, the further they are from realizing their true self. The types of alters built into a monarch system vary depending on the intended role and occupation of the slave. Common alters include sex kittens. Data or library alters are used to store volumes of information. Ritual alters perform rituals and satanic rites as part of whichever cult or secret society to which they may belong, often involving sacrifice. Regardless of the viewer's personal religious opinions, these elite cult members truly believe and perform certain ceremonies accordingly. Deaf and mute alters prevent the rest of the system from hearing secret conversations. Suicide alters are programmed to kill themselves if caught by an enemy, or begin remembering and realizing what they truly are. Animal alters think they are animals or animal hybrids. Seemingly normal front alters fool anyone with whom they may come in contact. Front alters will be very convincing and have absolutely no recollection of their abuse and believe they have lived an ordinary life.
I thought I had a very perfect life, had a wonderful husband and beautiful children and anything money could buy. I lived in a beautiful neighborhood in Agora Hills, and I had no idea I'd ever been abused.
These are only the most common alters. Some will have specially designed alters depending on their situation and role. Each alter is a component of the larger machine, the result being that no single identity can rebel against the system as a whole. In America today, there are hundreds of thousands of these multiples from every walk of life, the bum on the street to the corporate executive. Mind control multiples have two basic controllers, their programmers and their owners. Programmers are specially trained individuals with expertise in the mind, conscious, and hypnotherapy. Skilled in the art of breaking down and controlling the mind, they are the masterminds of the system. Each monarch is their work of art, and many victims view them as a godlike figure.
The truth is that there are slave auctions that very elite people attend to be able to own and buy the best mind control slaves that money can buy.
Handlers, while being similarly trained, merely maintain and control the slave on behalf of the owner or programmer, ensuring the programming remains intact and bringing forth the correct alters to perform whatever function may be required at various times.
Cheers, Butterfly. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, and I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. Did you hear me, Butterfly? Miles to go before you sleep.
Perhaps the most notorious individual associated with mind control is Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino.
Talking to Dr. Aquino and his wife, you are a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army.
Correct.
Now, and how does the Army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
The Army has known about my religion for the entire span of my Army career, which began in 1968. And there was a reasonable amount of curiosity, as there has been all the way along, with what exactly is this strange and unusual thing. And I've talked about it in much the same way that I've talked here today on your show about it. And other than that, the Army has paid very little attention to it.
Aquino, the silver-tongued savant of total mind control, served as a U.S. intelligence officer and Army PSYOP expert, where he helped perfect the science of creating mind-controlled subjects, garnering an above top-secret military clearance. A self-described expert in black magic, he joined his friend Anton LaVey's Church of Satan in 1969, where he quickly became a high priest before breaking away to found his own satanic sect. Although having been implicated by multiple alleged trauma-based mind control victims who recall his bizarre appearance and horrendous abuse, he was never criminally charged.
It was here, parents and others allege, that as many as 60 young children were ritualistically abused by soldiers of Satan.
Colonel Aquino, we note, sir, for the record, that you were originally implicated in the dreadful charges of child abuse. We note also that no charges were ever brought against you, and presumably you have been cleared. Would you like to comment on why those charges were brought against you?
Well, the entire time that the so-called child molestation scandal was occurring at the Presidio, the time period when these terrible events were supposedly taking place, I was assigned to the National Defense University in Washington, D.C., and my wife was out there living with me.
But is it not a fact that a 3.5-year-old girl identified you as the alleged perpetrator of molestation?
No, as a matter of fact, it is not the case. An accusation was made by her stepfather, who was an Army chaplain, speaking on behalf of this child. In her original interview with the FBI, she denied ever being molested.
Well, I've seen you are innocent until proven guilty. You were never charged in this case. I don't want to belabor the point. I have seen, however, the affidavits for the search warrant of your home, and they indicate the child is speaking to the authorities, not her father.
This was after she had been subjected to therapy.
At least one victim, a child in daycare at the Presidio military base in California, was able to positively identify Aquino's home and describe with uncanny accuracy its distinctively satanic interior. As part of the investigation, a search warrant was served on the residence of Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino and his wife Lilith. Yes, Lilith. As a result of that search, numerous videotapes, photographs, photo albums, photographic negatives, cassette tapes, and address books were confiscated. Most disturbingly, also observed during the search was what appeared to be a soundproof room. However, Aquino nor his wife ever faced charges relating to those allegations. In her riveting autobiographical book, Transformation of America, trauma-based mind control victim Kathy O'Brien names Aquino as one of her primary abusers. O'Brien even claims Aquino made a how-to video using her educating military officials in the skills needed to program slaves, entitled How to Divide a Personality and How to Create a Sex Slave.
I know that some of my perpetrators were actually known Satanists, and some of them were not. I know that Sammy Davis Jr. actually painted his little fingernail with red nail polish and was actually part of a satanic group.
High voltage, handheld stun guns are a handler's necessity for wiping the victim's memory, but must be applied within 24 hours of the event to be forgotten. The brain stores memory as short-term for roughly a day before it is filed away as long-term memory. High voltage scrambles the memories before they can become a cohesive, long-term memory. Some handlers use a cattle prod or specially designed staff with hidden electric probes. Fritz Springmeier writes in his groundbreaking book that programmer Michael Aquino used just such a satanic staff specially designed to wipe a slave's memory.
This is Michael Aquino, who's head of Temple Asset. He's a mind control programmer, and I don't think that he's got his staff in his hand there in the picture, but he oftentimes carries a staff. That's a staff is like a cattle prod, and it will give you electroshock.
Monarch multiples almost always bear electric prod or stun gun scars, or their resultant moles. However, few outsiders can recognize them as such. Those in the entertainment industry have long been popular targets for mind control.
I'm Savannah Guthrie alongside Matt Lauer and Al Roker. Will someone do the junior high hug? It's like this. You gotta make it real awkward.
That's exactly how you have to have a certain amount of distance between the bodies in junior high.
Yes, like they say in Catholic school, leave room for the Holy Ghost. Anyway, there is a lot of memories today, actually. It's a big day in music history.
35 years ago today, Elvis Presley passed away, the king of rock and roll, and as Mark Cohn says in his great song, Walking in Memphis, there's a pretty little thing waiting for the king down in...
Yes, like they say in Catholic school, leave room for the Holy Ghost. Anyway, there is a lot of...
The code word that triggers El Roker, black man wearing the suit, is Holy Ghost, and it causes him to freeze up.
I'm Savannah Guthrie alongside Matt Lauer and Al Roker. Will someone do the junior high hug? It's like this. You gotta make it real awkward.
That's exactly how you have to have a certain amount of distance between the bodies in junior high.
Yes, like they say in Catholic school, leave room for the Holy Ghost. Anyway, there is a lot of memories today, actually. It's a big day in music history.
35 years ago today, Elvis Presley passed away, the king of rock and roll, and as Mark Cohn says in his great song, Walking in Memphis, there's a pretty little thing waiting for the king down in the...
Celebrities are also Manchurian candidates.
The first celebrity mind control subject was a World War II pinup named Candy Jones. Candy was a popular pinup girl in the 40s and 50s. Born Jessica Wilcox to an absent father and abusive mother, Jones developed multiple personality disorder, now called dissociative identity disorder, at an early age to cope with the neglect and abuse she endured. She was highly hypnotizable and possessed a great deal of patriotism, having done several USO tours during World War II. After divorcing from her first husband, Jones was recruited by the CIA. Thrilled at the opportunity to help her country, she allowed Dr. Jensen, a CIA agent, to hypnotize her. He quickly found her alter personalities and developed the strongest one, named Arlene Grant, into the perfect super spy. She was trained to courier messages, seduce a target, and kill with her bare hands, all with complete amnesia following the event. Jones was likely the first of her kind, and as such, she was shown off to intelligence insiders as an example of what such programming could produce. It was not until later in life that, through hypnotic regression, she was able to discover what she truly was, a mind-controlled spy. According to researchers, Marilyn Monroe was the first true celebrity sex kitten. While some historians classify her relationship with the Kennedys as an affair, researchers in mind control have revealed she was actually a presidential model, the highest level of beta sex slaves. These highly prized assets are used to service presidents, executives, and world leaders. Like Candy Jones, Monroe came from an especially abusive background, being shuffled through 11 different foster homes and many abusive environments. She was working as a stripper named Mona at a burlesque club where she met Anton LaVey, founder of the Church of Satan. They had an affair, but it did not end there. Sensing her talent and vulnerability, LaVey, himself a mind control programmer, turned Monroe into a beta sex kitten, as he did with Jane Mansfield. The circumstances surrounding Monroe's death are still shrouded in mystery. A great number of facts point toward murder. Since Marilyn's demise, many other celebrities have lost their lives in similarly suspicious circumstances. To those who are aware of the darker side of the entertainment industry, the truth is quite clear. Many current slaves under beta programming pay homage to Monroe as the first presidential model. Coming up, more shocking celebrity victims and handlers right after this. What other famous figures are involved in this perverse form of mind control? Trauma-based mind control victims and whistleblowers Bryce Taylor and Cisco Wheeler have identified Bob Hope as a handler. In her book, Thanks for the Memories, Bryce Taylor writes, "My controllers and abusers were not low-level criminals, but instead were some of the so-called adored leaders and entertainers of our country." Hope has been the alleged handler of many Hollywood slaves. Unsurprisingly, many parents are willing to sell their children into total mind control programming to ensure fame and success.
Children are sold out by their parents for large sums of money. The children become mind-controlled slaves for life.
You know, we hear about, the Manchurian Candidate, this idea that the CIA was actually doing these mind control experiments to create assassins or to create people that they could otherwise control. Is there truth in that, or is that kind of maybe an isolated incident? Like, what is the truth in a statement like that?
The Manchurian Candidate is basically based on the book and the movie, The Manchurian Candidate, which was then remade by Denzel Washington a few years ago. And it's really, of course, the Hollywood version is fiction, but it's based on fact. And when I say fact, I mean clearly documented in great detail that going back to the Second World War, these people were operational and used in a whole variety of different types of missions. What it really is the Manchurian Candidate is an artificially created multiple personality, where you, through a variety of techniques, create a new identity inside, and then there's some sort of code word, and the identity can be called out, given the mission assignment, and the regular person has amnesia for the mission. And so the idea, as far as I can figure out, is if the person's captured and interrogated, they're more resistant to interrogation because the out front person doesn't have any knowledge of the mission.
Right.
And these are described in documents going back to a book published in the 40s, up to the early 70s, a newspaper article, and in the declassified CIA documents. They describe real-life simulation experiments combined with operational use. And it's in detail, it's very clear.
Right.
Britney Spears is a Manchurian Candidate, and she is triggered in the following interview. When the trigger word is given, Spears' alter personality takes over her body.
You've had a rough year. You've had a year that would test a lot of people. Illness in the family, a breakup, this spasm of publicity about what happened from Mexico to London.
It was pretty rough, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Ah, weird. Hello. Oh my goodness. Hello. Ew. Strong Britney.
For Britney, the alter personality is programmed to take over her body when it hears the word weird. The alter that comes up after Spears is triggered is a child whom is surprised of where she is at. Pay attention.
It was pretty rough, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Ah, weird. Hello. Oh my goodness. Hello. Ew.
You get tortured far enough or traumatized far enough, your dominant personality just goes to sleep. And what's left, and this is a normal human reaction to excessive trauma to protect you, and what's left is a very childlike persona of yourself from when you were about 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And you have no ability to resist, you're vulnerable, and then that's when they hypnotize you. Dissociation is the key to all this.
When a child alter comes up behind an adult, the adult may find himself talking like a child. Again, notice that the alter that takes over Britney's body is a child.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Ah, weird. Hello. Oh my goodness. Hello. Ew. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Ah, weird. Hello. Oh my goodness. Hello. Ew.
Most world leaders and celebrities are in fact Manchurian candidates.
Is the Manchurian Candidate is an artificially created multiple personality, where you, through a variety of techniques, create a new identity inside, and then there's some sort of code word, and the identity can be called out, given the mission assignment.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Ah, weird. Hello. Oh my goodness. Hello. Ew. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Ah, weird. Hello. Oh my goodness. Hello. Ew.
By now, Britney Spears has been reprogrammed to be triggered by other words. Britney Spears has another alter personality that likes to wear a pink wig.
But you can also quite easily find video online of she's coming along in a car, she's leaning out the window, and she's got a pink wig on, and she's talking in a British accent, and she says that she has no idea who this guy is that the reporters have asked her about, who's her boyfriend that she'd been dating for like the last 6 weeks or something.
Huh.
And the paparazzi say they always know they're in for a show when she comes out with a pink wig on.
These parents think the final outcome will be worth it, and if the child can't remember the electroshock and abuse, how much can it affect them? Interestingly, experts have discovered that as advanced and developed as the programming has become, it usually comes unglued between the ages of 27 and 30. When this happens, the victim essentially falls apart and begins behaving extremely erratically, switching alters at inappropriate times. At this point, the victim will be called back in for reprogramming, often under the guise of rehab. We have seen this time and time again with various celebrities such as Britney Spears, Amanda Bynes, Shia LaBeouf, Lindsay Lohan, and many more, all having meltdowns around this age range.
So let me ask you this. What is happening in Hollywood that a guy that tough will be on the street waving a gun, screaming, "They are trying to kill me"? What's going on? Why is Dave Chappelle going to Africa? Why does Mariah Carey make a $100 million deal and take clothes off on TRL? A weak person cannot get to sit here and talk to you. Ain't no weak people talking to you. So what is happening in Hollywood? Nobody knows. Maybe the environment is a little sick.
Once top secret, trauma-based mind control programs are now becoming mainstream fodder for television and movies. Thanks to the brave victims who have managed to come forward, the veil of secrecy surrounding mind control and its terrifying applications is beginning to fade. There is hope. Those who are having flashbacks or remembering horrific abuses often feel that no one will believe them.
The worst thing to call somebody is crazy, is dismissive. I don't understand this person, so they're crazy.
Too often was that the case in the past, but with the power of the internet, what has existed for so long in secrecy is now coming to light.
People are waking up, and they're waking up en masse, and it's happening all over this country.
Now, themes such as these are becoming mainstream in movies, television shows, and music videos. Once one is aware, the signs are everywhere. In the grand scheme, those who commit such acts are few, and the power of humanity is enormous.
We should help celebrities and others under Monarch programming. This is hard to do, since they are constantly surrounded by their handlers and their agents, CIA, to keep outsiders away from them.
In her book, Transformation of America, author Kathy O'Brien claims that she was the victim of a mind control program run by the CIA. She claims that George Bush Sr. used ancient magical hand signals to directly control her subconscious mind.
These are the ancient satanic mystery religion hand signs that are used on Monarch mind-controlled slaves. The Illuminati's puppets are continuously flashing these satanic ancient mystery religion hand signs. Doesn't matter what president, what presidential administration, It doesn't even matter what nation. We even see Adolf Hitler throwing up these satanic, ancient mystery religion Illuminati hand signs, because even Adolf Hitler was a satanic secret society member of the Illuminati international bankers. And of course, the American people are asleep to the truth. They don't know the truth. They aren't given the truth. They will never be given the truth about their satanic symbols that are put up all around them. And Donald Trump has long been a puppet of the Illuminati international bankers. These hand signs have their origin in the satanic mystery religions of Babylon and Egypt. It's actually quite normal for our world leaders to be under Monarch Mind Control Programming.
She also claims that Bill Clinton was under mind control. In covertly recorded off-air transmissions from the Bush-Clinton presidential election campaign in the 1990s, we can see that Bill Clinton was nothing more than a puppet to the puppet masters which placed him in the White House. Bill Clinton's demeanor seems to be similar to a person who is under a hypnotic trance.
Lampe, Missouri was a place where I heard George Bush and Bill Clinton talking, where from the point of view I had, they certainly were friends, and they didn't recognize any party lines between them. That's something for the, a smoke and mirrors illusion for the public. It's not something they adhere to, because they had exactly the same agenda, and that was for bringing in this new world order. I heard George Bush talking at that time. He was talking to Bill Clinton, and I've since photographically recorded it and wrote it verbatim in our book, that when the American people became disillusioned with Republicans leading them into the New World Order, that Bill Clinton, as a Democrat, was going to be put into the office of president. This was decided in 1984. Actually, I'd heard about it even prior to that, but that, as of 1984, they were already discussing it as an absolute fact.
The CIA is carrying out mind control on countless numbers of unwitting American victims. And he even went so far as to say the basic methods that they use in this mind control: hypnosis, drugs, and torture.
Three parts policy that they had adopted there. The second one was to find a way of being able to get total control of people's minds. And that would be done by taking hypnotism out of the realm of the occult and introduce it as a new science for the benefit of mankind.
Reflecting a policy of genocide either against the Tibetan people themselves or against their culture.
The Illuminati just doesn't program individuals. They program entire nations. What if I told you that the Big Bang was a fraud? What if I told you that the theory of evolution is a fraud? What if I told you that science is rigged like everything else the Illuminati control, create, and fund through the power of their great wealth? Well, that is all true. You are all living in a matrix you don't even know exists, and yet it dominates every aspect of your life. See, the American people only believe what their media tells them. what their indoctrination schools tell them, what their government tells them. The problem is, these are all functions controlled by the Illuminati. Your science is rigged and controlled. That's why most people don't believe in God anymore. And why don't they want you to believe in God? Because they are setting up the kingdom of the Antichrist, the one world government under the Antichrist, also known as the New World Order. America, you better wake up fast. Americans today are massively dumbed down, lost in their technology, lost in their little gadgets that they think so much of, spiritually cut off from God, spiritually dead, as the Antichrist kingdom continues to be set up. And what's coming very soon is the mark of the beast, the one world cashless currency, a microchip in our hands and in our foreheads. And indeed, the microchipping of Americans started on Tuesday, August 1st, 2017 at 3 Square Market. In Sweden and in China, the microchipping agenda is taking off, since they are biblically ignorant populations who don't understand Bible prophecy. Neither do most Americans understand Bible prophecy. The Word of God has long been under attack because it exposes this satanic New Age system that is now rising. And science has been used to dumb people down into thinking that the Bible's in error and that there's no such thing as God. It's all rigged. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell. See, this is tied to a global economy. Save he that had the mark or the name of the beast, this is the Antichrist, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. The 666. See, if you are a Bible-believing, born-again Christian, you understand that Revelation 13:7 talks about the one world leader that is the Antichrist. You understand that Revelation and the book of Daniel talk about the one world government. You understand that the one world religion is prophesied in Revelation 13:8, and this will be the satanic world religion under the Antichrist. Then you know about the one world currency microchip in Revelation 13:16-18. And what does the Bible say happens to those who take this microchip into their bodies? And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. The Lamb, of course, is Jesus. They will be tormented in the presence of Jesus for eternity. And it continues, quote, And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. You better wake up fast, America. You better wake up fast, atheists. You take this microchip into your hand and your foreheads, and you're going to be damned to hell for eternity. You're going to be damned to the lake of fire for eternity. You better wake up, and you better wake up your kids while there's time. Now they're trying to set up their little scientific dictatorship. They've used science, rigged science, to attempt to discredit the Word of God, but they have failed. Because the end-time prophecies are accurate and dead-on correct. The Word of God proves itself to be the Word of God. Jesus is God. Science is rigged, and they want you to forget that the Word of God exists because the end-time Bible prophecy exposes it all, and their satanic kingdom cannot rise if we know what they are doing. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Jesus.